Right.
Ed, I just want to go back in your past. What was your introduction to comic books as a whole? Like when you were a kid, what was that?
Oh God, I don't remember. I remember my grandma used to give me those old. Remember in the old, what the heck was that? Oh, in the old days they used to uh, cut the logos off of comic books for
The
return,
returns,
Yep.
they would
and
send
because
it
it was
back. Yeah.
cheaper to send the logos in, and then of course then they would turn around and sell the comics themselves, even though they weren't supposed to. And they would sell those for like a nickel a piece or whatever. So I got a lot of those comics from my grandma, and for a long time I was like, why do these things have the logo cut off? I just thought that was strange. But that was my introduction to like Batman and Robin. I think, and what I used to always say about her, which I think might have been true. Uh, I don't know what was going through her head, but I got a lot of World's Finest and a lot of Dell comics. And Dell at the time, their slogan was "Dell comics are good comics," and World's Finest comics. So I think she just believed them. Okay, well, these are the world's finest comics. They got to be good. And Dell comics are good comics. They couldn't print it if it wasn't true. So I would get a lot of those with the logos cut off. So I had a ton of those comics that I would get from my grandma, and that kind of introduced me to the whole world of like I didn't know anything. The first comics that I ever really saw were I think somewhere along the line I saw some Superman comics. Um, because even then, like that's when the Superman TV show was like on the air as a regular show. It was like black and white on your TV, and it was. And actually, I think at the time we didn't even have a color TV anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. But I used to see Superman on TV, so to me he was a TV character, and I got these comics. Oh, he's in comics too, and I just got really enthusiastic about comics. I don't know why. I always liked the newspaper, the funny papers, and when I was a kid, I used to like spend hours with those things on Sunday morning, and I just really enjoyed them. And some of the artwork I thought was really good. Um, Smokey Stover and stuff like that. That was just like outstanding. I loved it. But when I first saw comic books that my grandma gave me, I was just like blown away by it, and it was like Batman and Superman. I'd never even heard of Batman. It's like, who's this Batman guy? I knew who Superman was, but I don't know. Batman and Superman together, is there in their own comic, that kind of thing. Um, and then as I grew older, for some reason, I got into Superboy. I don't know why. Maybe because I was, young or whatever. And I used to just walk around with a Superboy comic like in my back pocket, kind of rolled up, and I would for some reason I would take the covers off and throw them away. I don't know why I did that. Don't know why. And then I would just like fold up the comic itself and just like stuff it in my pocket. And I had all these, comic books. And for the longest time, I had all these comics. And then somewhere along the line, I think when I was like 9 or 10, um, they were making a big mess in my room, and I think my dad just like picked them all up and threw them away, or burned them in the barrel and back. And I just got really mad, and I said, okay, well now I'm going to get back at them by just having a real collection. I'm going to really go out there and go out and buy those comics. So I went out and I got a subscription to Hawkman, and I used to buy every issue of the Flash. I was big into the Julie Schwartz Infantino and the Green Arrow with Gil Kane and stuff like that. So I just became a very big DC fan. And I just got all those Julie Schwartz comics. So it was Flash and Hawkman and those books that were my favorites. And then at some point, I guess in school it was like Marvel and DC got to be the whole. There were people who liked Marvel and people who liked DC, and I had read a couple of I think Strange Tales, Human Torch, and I think originally Human Torch was in Strange Tales, and then eventually started reading Spider-Man. I think that my first Spider-Man issue was like number 16 or something, and I'd see comics at the barbershop of all places. That's where I really got to see like how many different comics there were. And that's where I first saw things like The Fly, which I'd never known before that. And I just thought it was really neat, and I just started buying them and collecting them. I had a gigantic, huge collection of these comic books that I just lugged around for years and years, and I still have a lot of them, at home, being eaten by mice and stuff. But I don't know. I just always liked the miniature world that you had in the comic book. There was something about it that I just really enjoyed. It was so cool, and it was like the stories were interesting. And my life was very dull, and I don't know. I read a lot of science fiction and stuff like that. It's just like it's just the ordinary reason that kids that age get into science fiction or adventure stories or superhero type things. Just nothing special about it. Really, just like typical stuff. But I think I just at some point I just got and I was always drawing. So at some point I just made the connection. It's like, hey, these are actually drawings that people have made, and that I could actually be one of those people and draw the comics myself. That would just be so cool. And I would fantasize about how cool it would be to be one of the people drawing the comic books, making the comics. It just seemed like the neatest thing on earth. And so somewhere early on, probably when I was 10 or 11, I just sort of determined, it's like, I'm going to become a comic book artist. Somewhere, somehow, I had no idea how. And then when my parents, I grew up mostly in Ashland, Massachusetts, which is a little rural town out west of Boston. And when my parents moved to New Jersey, and I realized I'm just right across the river from New York, and a bus ride away from Madison Avenue, and I can go into New York on a bus and go up to the comic book companies and just visit them and bug them and annoy them and try to make friends and stuff like that. And it's just like, to me, it was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm going to do, because I didn't like college. I was like spent like, I don't know, 3 or 4 semesters in an engineering curriculum at a community college. Didn't like it at all. Didn't enjoy it. I didn't like high school. I hated high school, and the college just seemed like more high school. Like, oh boy. And at the time, I think my dad was very concerned that I get into some kind of college so that I couldn't get drafted and go to Vietnam, because that's when Vietnam was very big. And I think he was just afraid I was going to get like drafted and get killed in Vietnam, which never bothered me. I always thought like I probably would never get drafted, and if I got drafted, the chances that I get sent off to combat in Vietnam was very small. And even in that unlikely event, the chance that I would then get killed in Vietnam, very tiny. And so it just never, I was never like terrified of, oh no, I'm going to get drafted and sent to Vietnam. It just like didn't seem real to me at all. Um, and it still doesn't. It's just like, okay, well, that seems like a very unlikely course of events. Um, and then later on, when I was in high school, actually, I knew some people who went to Vietnam, and strangely enough, this one guy went off to Vietnam, and he was just like one of those weird gung ho. You can picture him like, I'm gonna kill people. I'm gonna go. It's like, oh God, go. Go. And then the other person who was a friend of my brother's, actually, he went over there and he came back and he just like told us about what a beautiful country it was and how wonderful it was, and how when the war was over he was going to go over there like just as a tourist because he enjoyed it so much. So I was never really like terrified of Vietnam, but my parents were, I guess. So you know, I don't even know where I was going with that, but
Comics was a good way of doing something else.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like I didn't have any other job prospects in mind, and I know my dad thought, oh well, he can draw, he can work in commercial art, he can make a lot of money doing renderings, because he worked for an oil company. He worked for Tidewater Oil Company, which became Getty, and their big brand was Flying A. So it's like, well, they have people who draw like the service stations, and you can like do architectural renderings of service stations. And I just thought that sounds boring. It's like, that doesn't sound like a career in art that I would want to. Like nowadays, I would think that that's kind of neat, but in those days, the worst thing I could think of was, oh, good, I get to do, you know, drawings of service stations. And I had taken in high school, I had taken mechanical drawing, and I did very well at it. And so it's something I could have done, but that's not what I wanted to do.
So, Ed, did you have any formal art training then?
No, not at all. I did take a few art, like sort of an art course with some woman who did stuff when I was a kid. Like it was like a summer type thing. But no, not really. And for the most part, even in high school, I didn't even take art because I didn't like the art teacher in high school. So I didn't sign up for the class at all, even though they tried to get me into it. Oh, you could do really well. I was like, nah, I don't really feel like it. So I did a lot of stuff on my own. So I never really actually had any training or at all. And then when I was in New York, I went to the Art Students League for a while. I was going to that for figure drawing, but I didn't do very well at it at all. So it's kind of dropped out of that too. But so no real training or of any kind. It actually would have been nice, if I could have hooked up with some kind of good class somewhere and actually learned something. I probably would have, gone much further than I did. But I don't know. I was okay with it though. Didn't really, didn't feel like it was necessary. I mean, it was superheroes. How hard is it to draw superheroes? For me, it was not hard. It was like, I could always draw Spider-Man. You didn't have to really worry about. I remember Steve Ditko had a drawing about the one guy who was an artist, and he had a painting of a giant foot or whatever. And somebody was looking at it saying, "I wish I could draw feet like that." To me, I felt the same way. Like remember Ditko always had a big thing with art and artists. Like remember his who was it? The guy who he drew a shoe in a gutter, and there was like a tin can, and the art critics were saying, "Look," and he actually attached a real tin can. Oh, that's genius. It's beautiful. It's like it was in one of his like Mr. A or something like that, and because I actually got to meet Ditko, and I was very disappointed because I thought, oh, he's like one of my heroes, and he just seemed like such a grouch. I don't know. It's just like I was very disappointed. I thought, oh, Ditko, I'll be like he's like a soulmate of mine. We'll really be able to talk about stuff, and he just seemed like very I don't know. I was very disappointed. Like, I thought he was going to be more of a fun person than he was, but he wasn't.
So, did you ever get to meet any of your heroes, and it was just an amazing experience?
Not really. I mean, not especially. I mean, I always had fun with Rich Buckler. He was good, but he was older than I was. So no, not too many of them really. I mean, I did know a lot of them. Johnny Ramita was always great. Marie Severin was always really good, but I don't think at the time there was much of like an artistic community kind of thing. I remember I went to a couple of those ACBA meetings, the Academy of Comic Book Arts, the kind of thing that we tried to come up with. Steve Gerber, because I liked Gerber, and I used to sort of hang out with him a little bit, but it just never seemed like a cohesive community of artists and stuff like that. We all just seemed like loner. Here's little loners here and there. Occasionally you would meet people in the business that you could become friends with. Like I was always friends with Klaus. I was always friends with, like I said, Dave Kraft and Jim Salacrop, and who was an amazing person. I don't know if you know him or not, but he did a lot of stuff like over the years with Sesame Street, and I mean, he's just known everybody in the business kind of thing. But I was never like big friends with a lot of them. I just didn't hang out with most of them.
Wanted to talk a little bit about your early career. Would love to know about your influences, I guess, first as an artist, but then also how did you break into work at Marvel and or DC?
well, my early influences are like everybody else, Kirby and Buscema and people like that, and I first, and now I can't remember anybody's name. Okay. Uh, anyway, I had a bunch of artwork that I did, and I was like real big. It was on illustration board, and it was like underground stuff, so called. Um, but it was like nothing special, and I just happened. Oh, I just happened to hear that the person I was talking to said that they worked at Marvel and in the production office, and I kind of like invited myself. Said, "Oh, I can go down there one of these days," because we lived in New Jersey, right across the river. I could just like go down there and see what it's like. And they said, sure, fine. And it kills me that I can't remember his name because it's somebody everybody knows. But anyway, so the first people I met there were Marie Severin and I think Herb Trimpe was in there. There was like a little production room, and can't remember. There were a few other people in it. And I remember Marie was very nice to me. Mori Kuramoto was in there with them. And Linda Lessman was in there, I think. And they had a bunch of stuff, and I just kind of did the tour of Marvel, and I hung out there, and I showed them my stuff, and I just tried to sell myself as an artist, a possible artist for Marvel. And at some point, I can't remember exactly what it was, but Saab Brodsky had a bunch of. He was doing the British reprints, like Spider-Man Super Stories, or not Spider-Man Weekly, Marvel Comics Weekly, whatever. They were the weekly British books, and they worked from these photo sets that were terrible, and he needed somebody to go through as a letterer and fix the A's that like they would close up the little hole in the A and the R's and stuff like that, and to do some lettering on some of them. So I did the lettering test and passed it, and they gave me for a long time I was doing stats where I was doing the lettering corrections and I was doing zipatones on the stats because I had a lot of zipatone gray tones, and I was doing that, and Klaus Janson was doing that. And so that's how I first met Klaus, and we were kind of like rivals for that little assignment. And I would come home and I'd have like tons of pieces of zipatone all over me, because I had my little razor knife and everything. I just cut it out and paste it down. And I did that for a long time, and then finally I somehow got an assignment to actually draw something. And it was for the Planet of the Apes black and white that they had, the big one. And
Magazine,
I had a couple other things like logos and stuff, but lettering corrections. But somehow, and I don't even remember how, but I kind of finagled them to like let me draw a story, and they gave me this story by Doug Mensch called Evolution's Nightmare. It was for Planet of the Apes, and I went crazy on it. I had big giant illustration board stuff that I did all the artwork on, and remember when I brought it into Marvel, John Reporton like almost freaked out because he said, "You know what it's going to cost just to mail this?" Because it was going to be inked by Sid Shores. I think he was in California or someplace like that. You're going to have to mail this all the way to California. Maybe it was Florida, and then they have to mail it back, and we have to do all this stuff. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think of any of that stuff." And it just sounded, and then they were like heavy, like number 80 illustration boards. So they were like cardboard. Right. So I said, okay, well, sorry about that. But I did that, and I guess Sid Shores inked it and did gray tones and stuff like that. And it was in, I think it was like one of the early Planet of the Apes.
So probably like around mid '70s is when you broke into Marvel.
Yeah, oh yeah. And in the meantime too, I had also started doing cover sketches and stuff for the British books that like the Marvel, can't remember what it's called, those the Spider-Man Marvel book and the
it was Super Spider-Man if I remember correctly, or
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Spider-Man Comics Weekly or something like that, and the other one was like a generic Marvel one. It had like Thor reprints and stuff like that. Daredevil reprints. I remember that. And I started doing cover sketches because the covers were like half and half. So you had the top half was one story, and the bottom half was another story. But they would put like half a Marvel story. They did like, I think there were like 10 pages or 8-page segments of a regular Marvel reprint. So you'd have like half a Daredevil story, and then they'd have to come up with a news splash and a cover for the second half of that story. So I did a bunch of cover sketches for those things, and I can't remember who drew them, but Ron Wilson, I think, drew several of the covers for those things off of my sketches. So we were kind of an early team too, and we shared a little space in Saul Brodsky's office, and I was there, and Ron was there, a couple other people were there, and it was great. It was like just really fun. I was like, oh boy, I'm in comics now. I'm in New York City. I didn't know what I was getting into. But it was a lot of fun. I remember one time, I think Barry Smith came in for, once to do some work or something. He had a bunch of stuff. I saw his early pages of Red Glass, I think it was, or one of those
Red Nails. Yeah.
One of the Red Sonja books, stories. Yeah, Red Nails. And I like Xerox stuff like crazy. Like people like artwork would come in, and I would just like grab the pages and Xerox them and keep the Xeroxes. For a long time, I had like tons of Xeroxes. I had like all this Gene Colan, Dracula stuff. I mean, it would probably be worth something today, just the Xeroxes alone. But and they were just pencils. They weren't inked pages. They weren't. Most of them weren't even lettered yet. But that was fun. And I did a lot of that stuff, and I just kind of like made a pest out of myself in the office, and I just hung out there. And I didn't have like an official jobs description or anything like that. I was just doing freelance, but they kind of tolerated me and they helped me out. And I remember Marie even gave me there was a drawing table that had been kind of broken and they were going to throw out. And I said, oh wait, I'll take that. I brought it home and fixed it up. And so I had my own first drawing table, like official Marvel drawing table. It was neat. So that's how I kind of got started in it. And then, like I say, I got that Doug Minch store, that Evolution's Nightmare. Because I switched it around later on in my career. I did a story for something else, and I changed the title. I just took the same title, and I titled it Nightmare's Evolution. So this is one that I wrote and drew, but can't remember. Somebody else scripted it. But anyway. So that was my first little story, and then they get, after that I just got like whatever I could get. I would just like say, give me this, let me do this, and it was kind of neat and fun. And I don't know, the rest is history.
So Ed, you had a great stint, and I think a lot of folks may not know this, but hopefully through this art sale they'll see it. You did some amazing cover layout sketches. Can you talk about some of those assignments? And in some cases you drew them, in some cases other artists drew them. Were there particular ones that you were, very proud of?
Tell you the truth, a lot of them I don't remember. I mean, I remember I did a bunch of Outsiders. I did some Fantastic Four. I did a bunch of Spider-Man stuff. Peter Parker, especially, I did. But the one thing I liked about it, well, most of them were on tracing paper or vellum, which is very similar to tracing paper, only it's a bit thicker. And I liked them, and I would just do quick sketches, and a lot of times I would color them, and I would color them with marker. I'd color them on the back side, so it would like the color would come through to the front, and
kind of like an animation style.
It was like a little effect, it looked kind of neat. I mean, I'd have to know what you have to, show to me to see it. But it was like fun, and I kind of made a little industry of my own out of doing cover sketches, because I was really too slow to actually grind out page after page like a story. Like I don't think I ever drew more than 6 pages in a row without getting in deadline trouble of anything I did. but I could do those cover sketches, and I could do one of those in like, an hour or a couple hours, and so I could do a whole bunch of them. And they started out paying really low, though, like $60 or something like that. But I got them up to like $120 or something like that. So, I got to the point where I just like got pretty good at grinding out the cover sketches, and I would just go from editor to editor and ask them, what they were doing. Do they need a cover? And they always needed covers. They always wanted to have a sketch for the cover artist to know what the cover was going to look like of a comic. And it was just kind of neat. And I remember I used to hang out with Dave Kraft and Jim Salicrup a lot, and Roger Slifer. Those are the three of us. It's amazing that Dave Kraft is now dead, and Slifer's been dead for a while. At least Salicrup is still alive. But we used to just like hang out and stuff, and it was things that I used to do. It was almost like a little New York adventure.
So with those cover prelims, I mean, one thing that's really unique about yours as compared to a lot of other cover prelims that are on the market, yours were generally in color, the ones that I've seen by and large. But you would think that the person getting that job, I mean, you must have been somebody that they held in high regard to do the cover prelims. Were you getting a lot of art direction on what to do on the covers, or were you pretty
Not
much
really.
taking?
Yeah, no. The only art direction I got, well, I used to hang out in Johnny Romita's office quite a bit, and he was kind of in charge of the covers at that time, and so I would get a sketch to do, and he would just kind of say, "Well, do this, do that, do this kind of thing," and he would pretty much okay all of them as I did them. I'd show them to him, and in progress, and he'd say, "No, do this, don't do that, do this kind of thing," and I would do that. I would kind of follow his direction. It was pretty good. But then it got to the point where, over at DC, I ended up being the actual cover editor for a while there. That was actually not a very fun job, because then I had to like hound people, like, "Where's that cover?" That kind of stuff. "Where's that art?" But it was neat, and then the editors could use those cover sketches to like direct the artists what kind of cover they wanted, and then also that it was like a color. They didn't have to follow my colors, and a lot of times they didn't, but it just gave them a quick, easy, like, "Oh, this is what's going to look like in color," and we can look at the other covers that are coming out that month, and we have a good idea what's going on with the schedules and stuff. So, but it was a fun, quick way to do stuff, and I enjoyed it, and it was like it paid more for me to do these quick little things for like $100 a piece than to try to grind myself through a story that would like take forever, and I couldn't finish it because I was too slow really to do pages. But the cover sketches are easy because nobody cares about the anatomy and the perspective and that stuff on a cover sketch. It was just like sort of an impression of how the cover is going to look. So nobody cared if somebody's triceps weren't correctly drawn or whatever.
No, Ed, speaking about covers, you also did a lot of logo designs, and even on the covers you designed, you played with the logos. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I like doing that and that was also like an Eisner thing, and I think Frank Miller was doing some of it. But it was basically just like, I remember that Eisner used to do stuff like that in the Spirit all the time, and so it was like a fan type thing that I like to do. And some of the logos I thought were pretty dull, so I would just like kind of spice it up. The Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, which was a book that I ended up drawing as a regular assignment. I would always try to do something with that cover because it was like sort of pseudo 3D. I didn't think it looked particularly Spider-Man-ish. But yeah, it was just like a fun thing, like to attract attention. Like, "Oh, look what he did with the logo. Look at this kind of different thing," and it was like, everybody seemed to like it. They enjoyed what I was doing with it, and even Stan, like, "Oh, that's great stuff," So, it's just like a fun thing to do. In those days, it was more like, how can I have fun here at work? I didn't consider it like an art career so much as here I am having fun at Marvel kind of stuff.
So, Ed, you had a pretty long career at Marvel. You worked on some very high-profile things like the introduction of Cloak and Dagger. as you look back on your Marvel career, what were some of the highlights for you?
Well, the Cloak and Dagger stuff was, of course, like I said, it was a highlight because introduction of new characters that actually got made into their own comic. And I give Bill Mantlo all the credit for that. I mean, he came up with the characters, but and he just gave me a bit vague, like, okay, Cloak is going to have a big cloak, and he's going to hide people in it, and he's going to use it for teleportation, kind of. And Dagger would be on the other. She'll just be the opposite. She'll be white and light, and have these light daggers that she throws. So, and that was his basic direction for the thing. I just followed. With Mantlo, I would he would have it already in his mind, and I would just kind of try to figure out what he was thinking, and then just interpret it. So he basically came up with Cloak and Dagger full blown, but I came up with the visuals of just the way the cloak was with that ribbon kind of, the dark stripes or whatever, and Dagger with the strange cutout with the front of her uniform that everybody was scandalized by for some reason. Like a lot of people, oh, that was terrible, But I thought a lot of other characters have much more revealing costumes than Dagger did, But for some reason, it's like, oh, you can see her belly button, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I was again just having fun with it, and it was fun to work with Bill, and it was neat. We were just a bunch of teenage fanboys, kind of at the time.
So Ed, one of my favorite Marvel covers that you worked on, which I think a lot of people didn't know you actually did for a number of years, was this one right here, which was the cover to G.I. Joe 21. Oh, yeah. You'd mentioned that you'd worked with Klaus Janson early in your career, and this was a collaboration that you had done with Klaus. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the history of this particular comic, but also your relationship with Klaus over the years?
I don't remember anything about that particular issue. I mean, I think it was just I think it was one of those issues where they didn't have anything specific that would make a good cover. So just have the G.I. Joe character climbing up the side of a building with the rope sort of thing look kind of neat and dramatic with the lighting and everything. And which Klaus was very good at. Because Klaus would try to influence the coloring. I don't know. He might even have colored that issue, that cover. I don't remember. But it was always fun to work with him. And he used to hang out with us too, with Dave and me and Salicrup and Slifer, those guys, in New York. For a while there, we were actually having dinner together, at least once a week in New York. I can't remember what restaurant it was. It was it was the restaurant that had they would have Wednesday. They would have spaghetti and beer, spaghetti and brew, and it was cheap. So, and we were, poor artists. So he's we'd go someplace and fill up on spaghetti. It was one of those, all the spaghetti you can eat and, all the beer you can drink for whatever amount of money it was. We would do that. And Klaus would often join us, and, we just sort of hang out a bit together. I don't know. He was fun I haven't spoken to him in years, but he was always fun to hang out with and stuff too.
Yeah, Klaus always speaks highly of you and working with you. As a matter of fact, one of the pieces in the that we're going to be selling off is a proof from the Dark Knight that Klaus drew a special drawing of Batman's head on to help out with that page in the sale.
Oh yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'd have to see it. But yeah, I always liked Klaus's stuff, and I always liked having him ink my work. I just always thought it was I would request certain inkers and stuff like that. And he was one of my top guys who I request a lot of. And when I could get it, a lot of times they would just ignore it and just give it to whoever. But when I could, I would get Klaus, and he was always very good. And then he sort of was also at DC. I mean, he worked at Marvel and DC, and he was specifically a Dick Giordano protege. And it's funny because I remember once going over to his house and his apartment, and he showed me a bunch of ink samples that he had done on vellum, and he had done a lot of Batman stuff. But one of the things that he did was he drew the wheels on cars. I thought looked kind of funny. It's almost like they were like, instead of being circular all the way around, they had like points on it, like a football almost. And I remember pointing up to him and saying, "No, that's not a good way to. You need to use like an ellipse template or something, to get a good like perspective on a round object, that kind of thing." But he always like did real good dramatic lighting and faces and stuff like that. So it was just kind of a wacky, oh, here comes Klaus kind of thing.
Do you have a favorite cover you did with him, like the one that stands out in your head, or?
Oh, jeez. Not really. I mean, I'd have to look at some sketches or look at the actual covers and I could say, oh yeah, I like that one a lot. I like that one, but I don't have any particular like favorites exactly.
So Ed, speaking of interesting collaborations, another one of my favorite covers that you worked on was this Deathlock cover with Bernie Wrightson.
I can barely see it. Yeah, and that was just luck. I mean, somehow he got the inking assignment. I don't know how. But that was a Rich Buckler thing. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I know that at one point that Rich had come up with the character and done all this stuff and everything. And then at one point or another, he was off of it for some reason. But he had a lot of problems and like were physical. He had headaches and stuff. But somehow I got that one, and I just like the idea of him backed up against the wall with the guns blazing away. And I don't even remember who assigned it to Bernie Wrightson, but they said, "Oh, Bernie Wrightson's going to ink that," and I was just, "Oh, okay, great." It's like it was almost like a Christmas present, So
it was an interesting combination at the time, and has become, in my opinion, a classic cover. Stood out in that entire run of those Deathlocks, and I like that Rich Buckler Deathlock run that you
I didn't even know Wrightson at all. I mean, I knew him, but I would run into him occasionally at comic conventions or maybe the DC offices, but he wasn't like in my inner circle or anything like that. So I was very surprised when he got that to ink. I was very happy. It was like, okay, great, So, I mean, to me, that was just like a gift. It's like, okay. I would always try to get like some good. I mean, I don't think he ever inked anything of mine again, or if he did, no, he might have inked one other thing. I'm thinking like one of those like Tower of Shadows, like kind of Marvel Monster Mags, something like that. I seem to remember he inked a. I think it was like had a demon on the front, and he was holding onto a little girl suspended over the village, and all the villagers who were down there. The typical kind of horror magazine thing. But other than that, I hardly ever had him working on my stuff. Mostly, if I had my choice of inkers, I would usually pick Klaus for whatever it was. But there were other things where I'd try to get other people to do stuff for me, or on my work. And a lot of it was just like, oh, wouldn't it be neat if I could get so and so to ink this, that kind of thing.
Was there anybody that you were trying to get to ink your work that you really wanted to have them work with you, and you weren't able to work with them?
There probably was, but I can't off the top of my head think of any examples of that. But most likely, for whatever reason,
We were always under tough deadlines and schedules.
Well, that's
can always align.
And sometimes I would do something and say, "Oh, it'd be perfect to have so and so do this," and if like fit right down their alley, and I would just say, "Oh, can you get so and so?" But then a lot they didn't listen to my advice most of the time. Like I'd be saying stuff like that to like people like Johnny Romita or Len Wein or whatever, and they would say, "Okay, well, we'll think about it," but I wouldn't get that much. Like people weren't saying, "Oh yeah, we're dying to do whatever Ed thinks we should do." I mean, at the time, I was really nobody, so it took a while for me to catch on, I guess.
What was it like doing cover prelims for Jack Kirby?
Well, I didn't have any real relationship with him, and I can't remember who the editor on those books were. That was either I think it might have been Marv Wolfman, um, but we didn't have any real relationship or anything at all. I just like knocked him out fast and tried to. I mean, one thing I was always pretty good at was trying to get the different artist styles. If I was going to do a cover sketch for Gene Colan, it would look as close to a Gene Colanish drawing as I could make it. If it was going to be for Kirby, it would look as close to a Kirby illustration as I could make it. So that was part of the thing. But I don't remember even. I don't even think I talked to Jack about that stuff at all. I think it was just like, here's a bunch of cover sketches, and I would always write all kinds of notes in the margins, like do this, do that. But I don't think anybody actually paid any attention to like if you look at some of those sketches, you'll find all kinds of little notes written in the margins. Extra heavy shadows on the face, that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think they just said, "Oh well, that's it,"
So Ed, as far as your Marvel career goes, we have some other examples of interiors that you did, some for the Defenders as well as Call the Conqueror. Anything that you remember out of those particular projects that you worked on?
Well, let's see. We had a long history with the Defenders, with me and Dave Kraft. At various points, sometimes I would write, and sometimes I would draw. Sometimes I think I actually wrote and drew one issue of them, or broke it down or whatever. The Call book, that was let's see, I think that was with Roy, and I remember Marie Severin had a lot to do with that, and I remember she sort of helped guide me on those. But I guess Alfredo Alcala inked a number of those. But Call was like, I considered that a failure because I just did not really. That was one of the books I just thought I was going to do a good job on, but I had a lot of trouble getting through it and meeting the deadlines, and they would change inkers, they would change stuff, and so it wasn't like a great memory. I mean, there was the one double page spread that I did that had the big flying manta ray type creatures. That was neat. That was a good memory, but that thing took me like days to draw. I was like spending all my time drawing it. And meanwhile, John Verporten in the background would be like, "Where are those pages, Hannigan? Where are this book is late," that kind of stuff. So it was like a lot of pressure. I seem to remember I don't think I even finished that book. I think they handed it over to somebody else because I was so late on so I think I did like my 6 pages, and then they gave it to somebody else to finish off because it was so late. I remember Marie had something to do with some of those covers. I can't remember what it was exactly, but she was always very good, as far as helping me out and giving me advice and stuff like that, working with me on stuff. So it's amazing to me that all these people that, like, almost all of them are now gone, which it just blows my mind that Dave Kraft has died. But people like Marie Severin, it's just like, for the longest time she was just there all the time, and then gone, that kind of thing. So just like, in a way, sad. It was like not great memories of some of that stuff.
Well, Ed, you moved over to DC Comics at some point. Can you talk about your transition from Marvel to DC, or how you got work over there?
Well, I think what it was is somebody had introduced me to Dick Giordano. I think it was at a Christmas party or something. And he was saying that he had all kinds of projects and he liked my work and he had all kinds of stuff. And I said, well, I'm not like married to Marvel. And I think at the time I was not real happy with Marvel for whatever reason. Maybe it might have been something to do with Jim Shooter, maybe not. I can't remember. So I decided I would start. Sure, I'm a freelancer. I can work for whoever I want to. And I remember Dick was very hot on getting me to do stuff. And then at some point, in all of this, somebody at Marvel said basically like, you got to work for one or the other. You can't work for both of us, competitors. So I just said, okay, then I'll work for DC, and I just kind of transitioned over to DC. And Dick was very good. He was like, he was the kind of guy who would take you out to dinner and all this stuff, and which for a freelancer starving in New York was not that I was ever starving, but didn't have that much money, and Dick was very good for stuff like that. And then he started like making sure that I got assignments at DC. So I sort of just brought my little cover sketch business over to DC from Marvel, and ended up staying there for quite a while. And as a matter of fact, I even had an office over in DC for a while. So they made me cover editor, which I was not good at because it was like a lot of work and there wasn't any big payoff on that. And I was actually just better at sitting there doing my cover sketches and, here you go, here's another one, that kind of thing. I was never good at being any kind of administrator or whatever. Because then for a while there, I had to assign the covers and stuff like that, and it was just a big pain in the butt.
It's not where you wanted to be professionally at that time.
Because at first it sounded like, oh, this will be great. I'll have like full control over who draws these covers, but after a while, it got to be a real pain.
Sure.
You have to like call people up and beg them to do stuff, and I don't know. Although I do remember for a while there, I managed to actually get Brian Bolland to do a few covers for me, which was real nice. Let's see, he did some Outsiders covers. For some reason, the Outsiders. I remember the thing about remember the Outsiders. The thing about that was that I loved was Mike Barr was the writer, and he was like great on schedules. He was never late. He was always like ahead of time on his schedules, and he'd give you something. He'd have plenty of time. There was no pressure, and so I got to do all these Outsiders covers. Which, I mean, I was never crazy about the Outsiders as a book, in particular, but there was no deadline pressure at all. So I could just do them when I did them and hand them in, and it was perfect. And Barr almost always like okayed everything that I did. So I got several of those done, and Jim Aparo would draw them, and they'd be real good. But he even got, I think he got Bolland to do a few of them too. So that was kind of neat. A lot of it was happenstance, but a lot of it was like taking advantage of, you knew somebody, or you could get somebody, or you knew somebody who knew somebody else, that kind of thing.
Sure. Hey, Ed, do you mind if we? I think your like the window curtain might be open. If we could maybe pull it a little bit, because your face is starting to get really white and losing a little detail there.
Is that? Yeah. Is that one?
Yeah.
I have two windows.
The sun is setting.
Either one. Is that any better?
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, the lighting in the room is pretty. Oh, that's much better.
There you go.
There.
We can see your beard much
Yeah.
more contoured at this point.
Yeah. I think the sun is coming in that window, so I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, there we go.
Not better.
Yep, they're all closed.
Perfect.
This room has never been as dark before.
So from what you're saying, though, as far as being an editor, that just didn't suit you as well, right? You didn't like having to hound your peers to get work done, and you were happier in the trenches.
No, it was just like you had to make a lot of calls and bug a lot of people, and people get mad at you that I was on their butt all the time to get something or other. Because I was I always hated when people were calling me to get something, and now I was doing the same to other people. So it wasn't too much fun. There was very little upside to it, at all.
You weren't making enough to take people out to lunch or dinner or anything like that. So
not really, no.
You just got to be the guy in charge.
Yep.
So Ed, at DC, you got to work with a number of different characters: Batman, Green Arrow, Deathstroke. Any of them that was your favorite to work for, or?
Well, I did work on Green Arrow for quite a while with Grell writing it. So that was kind of always a favorite. And in fact, there's a TV show Arrow, and every once in a while I see it because I usually don't watch superhero type TV shows, but every time I see it, they have him on the motorcycle, and I just think, why the hell did we not have him on a motorcycle in the book? It just seems like it would have been perfect, and we with did all this other stuff with arrows and ropes and sliding around the city, but it's like, why didn't we just put him on a motorcycle? But that's a minor thing. But yeah, Green Arrow, which I did a lot of, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I got to experiment on it because it was that larger size format with the different kind of printing, and the nicer paper. So I got to do like a more.
The Baxter paper stuff, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can't describe it. I tried to do a different style. I had a more influenced by Mobius kind of style, where it wasn't like the heavy comic book style that I had been doing before that. It was more like had the rendering with the lines and all that stuff, and that was kind of fun. I liked those stories. They were kind of fun. They were neat, and Grell's stories were very simple. So, you didn't have like a lot of subplots and stuff here and there. Like I didn't have to like put a lot of panels on a page. I could do 4-panel pages, which is always fun. Instead of like 9 panels of like all this like dialogue and stuff. The Batman stuff was kind of good. I wish I could have been better at that, but I did enjoy it. I think it came out fairly well. It sold well. I remember the Green Arrow and the what was it, Legends of the Dark Knight, both sold extremely well, and I was very happy about that because more sales, more royalties, and stuff like that. It's funny because I remember at one point I went to a convention, and for some reason they said, you're gonna get asked, you're gonna be on a panel, and they're gonna ask you what are the biggest selling comics at DC, and they said don't answer it. Don't say it's such and such. And I think at the time, one of my books was like one of the highest selling books at DC, and I wasn't allowed to say it, so I just kind of slipped it anyway. Yeah, that Legends of the Dark, well, that kind of thing, because for some reason they didn't want me to say what it was, and it's like, why not? Why not like toot your own horn?
Sure.
But that book did fairly well. I was kind of happy of it, and of course it was a very big. I won't say ripoff, but it was the Mazzucchelli, Frank Miller, Dark Knight series. It was kind of sprang out of that. So and I got to swipe a bit of those, and I tried to do it kind of in that mode. So that was, like I say, that was a fun thing. Green Arrow was a fun thing.
Yeah, Ed, I think Legends of the Dark Knight 1, we actually have a pinup that you had done with John Beatty for that. And as you pointed out, Legends of the Dark Knight was probably the answer to the X-Men ones of what Marvel was doing. It had multiple covers. It had a huge print run on that as well. So as you said, probably one of the most impactful books that DC put out in the early 90s. And I think it's great. The pinup that we have is pretty amazing. Don't know if you remember much about that or working with John Beatty on that particular piece and how that turned out, but hopefully that's a piece that you feel really proud of as well.
I mean, I again with Beatty, I didn't know him real well, but I would talk to him on the phone occasionally and write notes back and forth on do this on this page, that kind of thing. And I was for the most part very pleased with the work he did on that. The cover thing, when they first came out with the covers, I thought it was really weird because if you remember, they had like the blank covers with just the logo, and each one was like there was a red one and a magenta one and a yellow one and a blue one, I think. And they were just like, and they were over the actual real cover that was underneath. That was painting by can't remember his name now. But anyway, it was like a painted cover based on a cover sketch that I had done of the the mask, the face mask that was part of the story, and there was that mask, and then there was Bruce Wayne, and then I can't remember exactly that the face mask opened up, and then there was Bruce Wayne, and then there was Batman. You know, like a series of different covers like that. But they were kind of neat, and I can't remember the name of the artist who did the painting for that for those covers. But it was a fun, you know, and it was all for publicity, of course. But it was a fun series to work on, and you know, I got to do certain things that I enjoyed, that, you know, a little more than the because that was also the bigger standard books that were, you know, you had a little more leeway on the artwork, and you had bigger panels, and you could bleed off pages and stuff like that. So it was kind of neat. I don't know why they were trying. Maybe they were afraid that somebody's feelings would be hurt that worked on a different book or something. But it's like, you know, my feeling was to say, hey, if the book is doing well, like tell people this is a big hit. You know, maybe they'll think, hey, there must be something here. I'll buy one too.
Mhm.
You know, but I don't know. It was very strange. But I never really got. I didn't go to a lot of conventions, and especially the ones in San Diego. I just went to one actually. And the ones they used to have these conventions at the Commodore Hotel in New York, which were kind of fun, but it was like a small thing, and that's where I actually originally met like a lot of. That's where I met like Jack Kirby, and I met, you know, Wally Wood and stuff like that. For briefest of times, I think I met Wally Wood for like, you know, a week before he died or something like that. I can't remember. Although I did actually get to know his wife pretty well, Tatiana. Um, but those were kind of fun. The conventions at the Commodore, but they were like less than. They were not what you would consider nowadays the big kind of San Diego Comic-Con type big deal things. You know, they were the little cons. I think Phil Seuler ran them. I'm not sure exactly.
There's the creation cons too in
I
New
was gonna
York.
say Creation Con too is, I think, at that hotel or nearby.
Those are the ones I went to with my dad.
Yeah, I don't remember. A lot of stuff I don't remember, but we didn't go to a lot of them.
So Ed, I'm going to take you back a little.
Hmm?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, the San Diego con I went to, I remember it was blazing hot, and I had that big poster that all the Marvel heroes remember the Marvel handbook of the Marvel.
Yeah, the official handbook to the Marvel Universe. You were
This
the
big
person that did
poster
that.
that had all the covers like sort of melded together, so you saw all the characters. And I had several copies of that poster, and my wife and I were in San Diego, and we were selling it out there in front of the convention center on the ground, and I had a whole bunch of them. I sold those, and I think somewhere I still have like a couple of copies left of that poster. But I think, which again, I thought they could have marketed that much better than they did. You know.
I think people finally remember that series. That was really the first time that you got to see all the Marvel characters in one place, and people
Yeah.
studied those. I mean, and even artists, you know, they would go back to those books and find out how to draw the characters from those books.
And that was, and I think he's a genius to this day. Was Mark Grunwald. He was the one who thought that the whole concept up, and hired me to do the. And that to me was also, I did the cover sketch for every one of those issues, and there were 12 of them. But the cover sketch was like almost exactly the same for every single one, so I didn't have to really put any work into it at all. And they were all double spread covers, so I was getting paid double for that. And it was almost like, I can't believe this. I can't believe I'm getting away with this. You know, I'm getting paid double for every one of these books. But I had to do a cover sketch for every single one of them. And I think somewhere I actually still have the cover sketches for a couple of them at home, like locked away in my vault somewhere. You know, who knows where. But it was kind of a fun concept, and the whole idea of having it like all like jigsaw together as one big giant poster kind of thing. that was all I think genius, and that was all Mark Grunwald. He thought all that stuff up, and he was another one. He was like very odd person. We used to sometimes get like lunch at a deli and go into Central Park and sit there in the park and eat our lunches sitting on the benches at Central Park. That was kind of funny, but and Grunwald was, I don't know if you ever know anything about him. He was a very strange person, but he was very different. He used to also, he was the only person I could know that he could jump from a standing still on the floor. He could jump up to the top of a desk and just land on it, like boom, like that. It was like, oh my God, it's like no way I could do that in a million years. But I don't know. He was a fun guy, but then he was another one who just like suddenly died. It's just like very, very weird. And he was pretty young. He was about my age. And then one day, it was like came into the office. Was like, "Oh, did you hear about Mark? He died." It's like, whoa. Whoever thought that was going to happen? But I don't know, very odd. But it was fun, and that was a fun little book to work on. And I think I even did a couple of interior pages for it too. But all those covers, the cover sketches were very easy. And then I don't know. Of course, I drew the covers too for that, and they were pretty easy to do because I already knew what they were going to be. Like in every single one, there was the main character, the big character, Angel or Daredevil or whatever, surrounded by littler, pictures of the other characters, and sometimes Mark would say, well, so and so should be this big, and so this one should be a larger size, So you had Spider-Man was big in the foreground, and then you had like Mary Jane watching in the background, a smaller picture or whatever, the Melter, or some of these minor characters, and Mark truly tried to get every one of them in there that he could. I don't think he missed too many. I think and then when we did the poster, I had to do like other drawings to fill in the gaps between the various covers, so it all fit together as one big poster. And I don't know, I'd be interested if anybody has that poster. I mean, that's kind of a neat thing to have on your wall. It was huge. I think it was like 20 by 30 or something like that. And it had all those characters in it, the characters that were carved at the time. And I know that they did actually do other versions of that later. Other artists.
John Byrne did, yes. He continued your tradition of doing that. And I think the most difficult part of those also was sometimes like Mr. Fantastic would go through like 5 different covers with his arm.
Right.
And so you'd have to
stuff. Yeah.
you'd have to keep track of that.
Yeah, that was fun though. It's like, you did that kind of stuff as like a little surprise. It was like a little, we were being the Beatles or something, like adding little surprises into the album covers or whatever. So it was neat. I actually hadn't even thought of those for a long time, but they were like a nice little. And I think somebody actually even came out with a smaller version of that whole big giant Megillah that was like 9 by 12 or something. Like a little thing you could just put on the wall, thumbtack to the wall. Because that big poster like was huge. I mean, it filled up a lot of space on a wall. So that was a neat, it was a neat memory of those books and everything. It was fun.
So Ed, as far as DC goes, you also worked in DC licensing, worked for things on such as Mayfair Games.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about working with DC licensing?
Well, again, it was just another assignment, and it actually paid a little bit better, I think, than the normal comics. But I don't remember that much about it, actually, to tell you the truth. I mean, it was the Mayfair comics, the books, there were a whole bunch of different ones. There were those records that they had. There was one of them where I did like little record album covers or whatever they were. I can't even remember what they were.
You did some toy art as well, I believe. Toy art. You did some Batman toy designs, I believe, as well.
Oh yes. Yep.
I think you designed some globes.
Well, I didn't design the toys. They would just give me a picture of the toy, and I would do the artwork for its the little cards with the bubble cards that have the little toy and then
Placard.
Batman with his grapple gun that he would be firing or whatever. Um, I don't
A
know.
lot of people that collected those toys that will remember that. Yes.
Yeah, but I did a number of of things for the licensing department. And again, it was like I liked the people. And I was like, I can't remember who was like. I was going to say Terry Cunningham, but I can't remember. There's a woman who ran it, and I can't remember her name. But it was a good relationship. It was fun to do, and it paid a little more than regular comic book work too. So, it was kind of neat. I think I worked with Dick on a lot of those things. He inked a lot of them, I believe.
I kind of have a silly question, I guess, but because you had your hands in a lot of different things, whether it was prelims for covers, the placard art for toys, and other editorial duties. How did you keep track of the work that you were doing so you properly got paid for all the things that you were putting your hands on? It seems like you'd almost have to have a clipboard, hanging around, making notes on every single thing that your hand touched.
Actually what I did. I had a little clipboard that had everything written down on it. But I remember pretty well. I kept good track of and of course the companies would have to keep track of it. So, I never lost track of anything important, I don't think. But and I kind of just kept a running tally in my mind. Oh, okay, I'm doing this, and there were like little things, but they would add up. So like doing something over here that pays $60, or I'm doing another thing over here that pays like $300. And it's kind of at the end of the week I would kind of have an idea like how much did I make that week? How much did I do this here? And I remember somebody, I think it was Jim Salakrup, told me that you should try to come up with a figure like say $500 that you're going to make in a week, and that's like your nut that you're going to try. You got to do enough work to make $500 that week. Of course you can go over it, and so it would be in my mind the whole time. Okay, this goes towards my $500, and I would just like make sure I had enough work that week that would cover $500. So and I seem to remember it's like because the $500 a week would basically cover like most of my expenses, my rent or whatever, so it was enough to keep me going and keep me like in the game. So I just kind of kept a good mental tally of it. And I did have a clipboard that I wrote a bunch of stuff down on that I was, especially when I was a cover editor, I was like walking around with this clipboard all the time, like, cause I had to keep track of all these other people, what they were doing too, and that was a pain in the ass. But I just kind of got in the habit of I'd have it all written down. I'd have it all like or on yellow lined paper, that kind of stuff. And I would have sort of a good idea, and I would check it off, like strike it out. Okay, I did this, did that. But then you always had somebody else looking for it, so you always knew what you had done or what you were working on. And we had the voucher system at Marvel and DC was a good way to keep track of stuff like that. So I never ran out of. I always sort of had a pretty good idea of where I was,
Mm-hmm.
And most of my jobs were like fast kind of things. They didn't go for longer than a week or two, so I could remember where I was with any given assignment or whatever.
So Ed, through this sale, people are going to get an opportunity to get artwork that's coming directly from your collection to them. Anything as you think about them, keeping your artwork safe and preserved for future generations? Anything that you want to say to the fans out there that are buying these?
Well, one thing is, I'll tell you one thing is, I know with the not so much the pages of art, which I have tons of those, but the cover sketches in particular, I've always been very hesitant to sell any of them. So if anybody that's got a cover sketch by me, it's a rare thing because I never sell them. I try not to sell them if I can hold on to them. Because I always considered the sketches really to be like my real art. as opposed to like finished pages or whatever. And of course, I have lots of finished pages too. And I've sold a number of those over the years, and I don't have any covers left. I don't think I might have 2 or 3 actual covers still in my possession, but they all went fast because there were times when I needed money, and the fastest way to make money was to sell a cover. So, I don't have any of those, but I don't know. I would say that one thing with any kind of artwork is try to keep it away from the light. Try to keep it, especially the markers and things like that can fade. Try to keep it away from moisture. Try to keep it away from, some too much sunlight. Sometimes I used to spray stuff with fixative, but again, you never know how that's going to affect the artwork. So, a lot of it, you just have to be real careful with it and try not to expose it to too much stuff. Try to keep it away from humidity or sunlight in general, because anything like that will damage it or fade it out. Because this stuff was all cheap. It was like markers on tracing paper and vellums for the most part, and those are all fragile things, because when I did them, I wasn't really thinking about like how are we going to preserve these for the future. It was like, how am I going to give this to an editor, and it'll get handed around from the editor to the artist to the colorist to the, a lot of times I would do one cover sketch and it would go through several people's hands before it got back to me, if it got back to me, because that was another problem too. I was always like trying to make sure that they would give me my covers back. And I'm sure there are a lot of them out there still in people's hands that they never returned them at all. So like people just decided, I'll just keep this. But ideally, the whole idea was it would go from me to the editor, and he would give it to an artist, and then the artist would hand it on to the colorist, and then the colorist would return it, and eventually I would get it back. And that's usually what happened, but a lot of times that didn't happen at all. So what can I say? But just be real careful with the light and moisture, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Ed, I think you make a great point, which is a lot of these cover sketches don't exist from a lot of different covers, people's favorite covers. I think we can assume that, frankly, most of the published art got back to the artist that drew it, but the cover sketches didn't. And so I think that, as you pointed out, the fact that yours still exist is a piece of Marvel and DC history here that is lost in many cases. And I think it's fantastic that you preserve these for collectors and future generations to see.
And they're kind of ephemeral, but they're still around. They're still, they're still good, I guess.
Well, I mean, with the prices of covers today, with the original art, prelims are highly sought after by collectors. So it's good that you kept them, and because it's an alternative for people who can't afford published covers anymore.
Well, when I was doing them, they were like a lot of people didn't even know what they were. It's like, what the heck is this thing? It's like, because it was a sketch for a cover. It was like it was part of the work actually. It was just a tool to get the thing done. And I think it took a while for people to actually realize, oh, wait a minute, this is actually kind of a piece of artwork, isn't it? And it was a working piece of artwork, and a lot of times I consider them to be really more like better or just more interested, at least, than the actual printed, like finally drawn thing. I just thought, like, in a lot of ways, I think it's more interesting that here's a thing that that guy who actually thought of it put down on paper, and then everything followed from that. The inspiration. But then that's me, because that's what I was doing all the time. So I naturally just thought they were really neat. And I'm glad that they've caught on as the kind of thing that people can actually collect or trade or put on their wall, that kind of thing. I think it's kind of neat, because like in the earlier days of comics, weren't a lot of prelims, or else they were just like pencil sketches on a scrap of paper somewhere. And so you don't see a whole lot of early Jack Kirby, preliminary work or anything like that. It just doesn't exist anymore, or it would get thrown away. It's kind of thing people would say, okay, well, I'm done with this, throw it away. And there are some things that just get thrown away, and just like, no, this is too good. Like one thing I have at home, which I really like, is do you remember John Buscema did a poster of all of Marvel characters, had Conan on it, and had Submariner, and just like a whole bunch of Marvel characters, and it was all penciled on a big, huge piece of paper. Well, they photostated that and had it on a photostat, and then I actually found the photostat like in somebody's, I think it was wasn't for Portland, it was somebody's garbage can. It's like they had just thrown it away. It's like, well, we don't need this anymore. It's like, and it's just like, no, this is beautiful. This is like an actual record of Buscema's pencils on these characters, which were, I mean, because his pencils were incredible. And it, like, a lot of times he would pencil stuff on the back of his pages, and you would never see that. Like, he was very big with cowboys and stuff like that. And he would just do stuff in pencil on the back of his art pages, and it was like gorgeous stuff. And like whenever I could, I would try to grab it and Xerox it. But I got this thing, and I got the photostat that they were going to throw away. It's like, oh no. So fortunately it's at my house, like flattened out and framed, because it's a beautiful piece of artwork, and you're never going to see Buscema's pencils anywhere anymore because they all got inked and made into comics. So I mean, it was great stuff, and I mean, I loved good pencils, like a good artist that could actually draw with a pencil, and you don't see a whole lot of it anywhere anymore. So
It was a wise decision to rescue it. That's for sure.
but I was just really glad to get that, to have that. So.
Well, Ed, are there any other final words you'd like to leave us with as far as the sale goes?
I don't know. I'm not really. I'm kind of at a loss for. I mean, there's so much stuff I could go on and on about, but not organized to do it really. But it was a fun career while it was going. It was a lot of fun. The people were very, very good for the most part. I got to meet like some of my heroes, which was nice. Some of the artists that I got to meet, and sometimes even get to like stand over and watch them over their shoulders and see what they were doing, which was always amazing. And I got to work with some of the real good ones. So, what more can I say?
Well, on behalf of the other fans out there, I mean, I can tell you personally, there's a few pieces that just stand out in my memory as far as comics history that you had a hand in drawing, and I want to thank you for your contribution to the comics world.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks.